Satu was a worthless bum who had nothing going for him until he rizzed up the baddest teacher in school. Now she makes him wait after classes for special lessons every day, but they have to keep their relationship secret from everyone else. It all starts when Satu tries to take a piss and ends up in the same stall with a plot-heavy teacher named Kana. Kana then explains that she only came because the ladies' room is currently being cleaned. After she orders him to get out, he struggles to pry open the lock and starts fearing for his life because the whole school knows Kana is a hot-headed demon. When she asks why he is testing her limits, he explains that the lock is jammed and suddenly hears voices nearby, causing him to feel relieved that someone is coming to save him. However, Kana suddenly pulls him straight into her massive milk bags and says they will both get in trouble if anyone hears that they were in the bathroom together. Upon realizing that he is nose deep in her melons, he apologizes and tries to get up, but she tells him to go slow because her water fountain is about to erupt. After finally pulling away, Satu tries to breathe a sigh of relief, but a ball suddenly slams against the window, causing Kana to finally lose control. Seconds later, she tries to slap Satu for enjoying her embarrassing spill, but he quickly grabs her and says he also lost bladder control in the moment. A week later, Satu decides to head to the infirmary to ditch class again. Once there, he gets surprised to see Kana again, and when she asks if he is also not feeling well, he claims he had just sprained his ankle and needs to rest. Kana then says she suddenly caught a fever and can't seem to stop sweating, but as she tries to explain, Satu becomes entranced by the sweat sliding across her golden globes. Just then, she asks for help getting some drugs, so he quickly checks the cabinet and gets scared after only seeing those special tablets that are taken through the back door. He initially tries to return it, but she says they have no choice and bends over so he can administer it. After getting his Excalibur under control and putting on a blindfold, Satu opens up the holy gates, but accidentally gets too close to the nether realm. So she tells him where to find the right spot and begs him to make it quick. The moment he finally gives her the tablet, another teacher named Mayu shows up to check on her, so Kana stuffs Satu into the sheets. Kana then explains how she currently feels to Mayu while Satu fights the urge to drink some of her milk. After Mayu eventually leaves, Kana displays a soft side Satu never knew existed and thanks him for all the help. The next day, Satu ends up with a fever as well, and after showing up to apologize for giving it to him, Kana gets pissed because she discovered that he was just lying to skip class yesterday, so she shoves a massive pill up his cakes as punishment. Days later, Satu once again finds himself stuck with Miss Perky Melons in a coin-operated laundry. This time, Kana claims she got drenched on the way home from school and needed a place to dry off. After taking a closer look and realizing that his dirty mind won't be able to last against her plot cannons, Satu suggests using the dryer, but Kana gets pissed and asks if he just wants to see her goods. He immediately offers his shirt to prove that he has no bad intentions, but even after she puts it in, he realizes that her smoking hot bod looks perfect in anything she wears. As he tries to get his thoughts under control, the thunder gets a lot more intense, and he suddenly spots Kana crouching in fear, so he asks if she is scared of it. She then tries to deny it, but after another loud bang, she grabs Satu's hand for safety, failing to realize that her milkers are rubbing up against him. To make matters worse, the storms cause the power to go out. They both decide to search for the circuit breaker. After finding it on a high point in the back, Kana climbs Satu's shoulder to reach it. But while checking to see if she is close, Satu gets an eyeful of milkers and almost drops her. She also gets startled by the thunder and crashes into a shelf before a bottle of slimy detergent pours all over her body. The next moment, Satu tries to get back up by supporting her back, but as he tries to grab it, his hand slips and grabs something else. He quickly removes it and tries to shake the unholy thoughts out of his head, without realizing that he is currently massaging the zone of no return. Minutes later, she decides to switch places with him and ignores his efforts to avoid it until little Johnny finally releases some milk in her neck. Several days later, Satu is shocked to see Kana with his sister at home, so she explains that his mom is actually an old friend who asked for help looking after Shio. Satu then admits to being surprised that she can actually handle a young girl like Shio because everyone at school thinks she is a reincarnated demon. After claiming that she is actually really good with little humans, she picks Shio up to prove it, but Shio starts crying for dear life, so Satu carries her. Kana then admits to being horrible with young ones and says she can never fulfill her parents' wish of becoming grandparents. Upon hearing this, Satu asks if she has a type, So Kana starts listing out every quality that defines him before realizing what she just did and immediately saying that she doesn't want to breed with him. To avoid any awkward energy, he suggests playing with Shio in the water since she likes it. Minutes later, Kana enters the mini pool with Shio and asks Satu why he doesn't want to come in. So he claims he is just not in the mood, when he really just doesn't want to get so close to her cakes. After she notices him staring and gets shy, he starts slamming his head into a wall to get his intrusive thoughts under control. The next moment, Shio drags Kana's melon wraps off, and in an attempt to cover them up, Kana accidentally pushes her out of the pool. Luckily, she and Satu immediately catch her, but they end up sharing a kiss by accident. As they both pull away and try to hide the embarrassment, Kana spots something she hasn't seen in a long time and immediately starts drinking Kana's milk. Satu then tries to pull her away, but Kana stops him and says it's proof that she can also become a mother. Hours later, Satu's mom, Saki, returns and thanks Kana for all the help before suggesting that she go out with Satu since she can't seem to find a man. Weeks later, Satu tries to enjoy some peace and quiet in his otaku sanctuary at home, only to find Kana packing up his clothes with the same cold stare she always has. After asking why he never cleans up after himself, she explains how Saki invited her over and forced her inside as soon as she walked in. Just then, Saki shows up with Shio, so Kana tries to give her a piece of her mind. But Saki easily neutralizes her anger and says they have to celebrate since she finally found a new apartment to move into. However, after taking her very first shot, Kana's brain short-circuits, so Saki tells Satu that she has always been a light drinker. After Kana suddenly shows her a photo album, Saki decides to go through it and shows Satu a picture from when they were both classmates. After taking a close look at Kana's school photo, Satu tries to remember where he has seen her from. But then Kana points to a photo of a little boy and says he is the reason she chased her dream of becoming a teacher. One day, many years ago, she had just graduated and was convinced that she would never make it as a teacher because she had zero communication skills and chronic social anxiety. As she was walking past a bridge and accepted her fate, a boy with the same brain matter as a rock suddenly jumped into the river below, so she dived in and saved him. Much later, she cleaned him up at her place, and after thanking her, he explained that he was just doing anything he could to become a lot more mature. Upon hearing this, she wished he had actually succeeded, so she could test her communication skills on him. But he said she was already doing great since they had been talking this entire time. He further explained that she had to take a bold step if she truly wanted to achieve her dreams. As she continues gushing over how amazing he was, Saki takes a look at the album and tells Kana that her hero is actually Satu. After she hugs him and says she has always wanted to thank him for everything, Saki pulls her aside and gives her instructions for the perfect Gok 5000, so she can really show Satu how much she appreciates him. She then tells Satu to make sure he loses his V-card so Kana can finally become her in-law. As soon as she leaves with Shio, Kana hugs Satu again and says she has been waiting for an opportunity to thank him. He then tells her not to worry about it, but she quickly grabs his otaku comics to figure out what kind of freaky stuff he is into. The next moment, she drops the comic and says her kitty can't handle such demonic positions before getting on the bed and offering to let him play with her milk jugs instead. Once again, Satu refuses and tries to tell her, but then she drops the melons on his glizzy and continues insisting until he hears Shio coming in. In a desperate attempt to protect Shio's eyes, Satu decides to give Kana some water from his mouth, but at the last moment, he hesitates because getting freaky with his teacher might ruin her reputation in school. After Kana suddenly pulls him close for a steamy kiss and tells him to call her big sis whenever they are outside school grounds. At school the next day, Satu foolishly forgets her instructions and calls her big sis in front of everyone, so she loses it and cusses him out before hiding in a corner to express her true emotions. Several weeks later, Satu gets excited to join his mom on a tropical beach for her friend's wedding. But as usual, he sees Kana there as well and immediately asks Saki why. After reminding Satu that his dad couldn't make the trip, Saki tells him to get excited because he can finally seal the deal with Kana. When she also claims that Kana has feelings for him, Satu's head nearly implodes, but he still refuses to believe it. So Saki takes off with Shio and tells him to spend more time with Kana. Moments later, Kana takes him to a private spot on the beach, and while she gets set up, he drifts off into La La Land and convinces himself that she doesn't actually have feelings for him. Just then, she asks him to apply sunscreen and casually takes off her melon wrap while yapping about how nice the weather is. While rubbing the sunscreen into her back, Satu once again disconnects from reality and continues reminiscing on all the times he caught a glimpse of Kana's true feelings before she accidentally admits to being in love with him. She immediately panics and tries to face him, but he ends up with a handful of milkers. After telling him to pretend like he never heard it, she jumps into the water to hide her embarrassment and immediately starts begging for help because her legs suddenly cramped up. All of a sudden, she feels a bite wound and tells him about it before they spot a sign warning about sea snakes. As Kana gets scared for her life, Satu offers to drain the poison and asks where she was bitten, so she points to a spot right beside her floodgates. Despite being a little scared, Satu pushes her back and promises to be gentle before proceeding to drain out the venom until she loses control and passes out. Much later, they meet up with Saki, who then teases Satu for making Kana flustered before running ahead to join the wedding reception. On the way there, Kana thanks Satu for his help once again and says they should have spent a little more time having fun together. He then suggests coming back after entering the wedding reception, but Kana misunderstands this as a wish to marry her and flips out. Days later, they return home, and while having dinner with Mayu, Kana tells her about the trip, but leaves out what happened with Satoi before suddenly getting a call from him. As she gets distracted and continues talking to him, Mayu starts dreaming about Suzuki. During lunch the next day, Suzuki gets shocked when Satu tells him that Kana is now officially his girlfriend. However, he is mostly upset that Satu won't be eating lunch with him and reminds him that literally every other student is scared of his face. Satu then reminds Suzuki that he will be graduating soon and wishes him luck with his non-existent social life before running off to meet Kana. Minutes later, Suzuki accepts that he is destined to be alone and tries to enjoy his lunch in peace, but then Mayu suddenly shows up and asks if he wants to eat together. After taking a moment to make sure this isn't drug-induced fantasy, he asks if she is okay with his hideous face, so she holds his hand and says she will never feel scared around him. Moments later, she takes a peek at his lunch and commends his cooking skills. After also saying that she loves trying new dishes, she suggests switching some of their food and tries to feed him. Upon realizing that he just wanted her to drop it in his plate, Mayu freaks out and tries to explain that feeding students is perfectly normal. The next moment, she slips and, after ripping off her skirt while trying to save her, Suzuki apologizes and offers to help her up. When she complains about being stuck, he reaches in and lifts her out of the water, but accidentally turns on the water, causing her snail to get blasted. Moments later, he apologizes and hands over his sweater since her clothes got soaked. Hours later, Kana notices that she has been wearing the sweater all day and asks if she has feelings for Suzuki. Mayu immediately denies it and says a teacher should never get freaky with her students, causing Kana to regret all the secret makeout sessions with Katu. Just then, Mayu sees that Suzuki left his bus pass in the sweater, so she quickly runs out to join him on the train. However, they end up just inches away from each other because of the crowd. Mayu also notices that her shirt got stuck in the door, so she tries to pull it out, but a sudden lane change causes her to slam into Suzuki's body. After controlling the demons in his mind, Suzuki asks her to get off, but she refuses and explains that her shirt popped open. To make matters worse, she forgot to put on her melon wraps after what happened during lunch, so he offers to shield her with his jacket. The next moment, another lane change causes him to slam her against the door, and after realizing that he can't step back anymore, Suzuki offers to help her with the buttons. However, after getting the first few buttons, he grabs her melons, thinking they are buttons, and spends the next few minutes juicing them until she gets tired. Much later, they finally get to the station, but an officer notices Mayu's rumpled shirt and asks if Suzuki was assaulting her on the train. After he says no, the officer gets a lot more suspicious, so Mayu grabs his arm and says they are a couple. She then notices the shocked look on Suzuki's face and tells him to play along so the officer can leave. However, Suzuki becomes convinced that she is just trying to save him, so he tells her to stop acting and says he can handle whatever happens, but this causes her head to spin as she now thinks that he hates the idea of dating her. Several days later, Suzuki finds himself in a tough spot as several onlookers watch in shock while he pays for 2 lucky sets, which are widely considered to be toys for the little ones or creeps trying to lure in their next victim. Just then, he hears a familiar voice and sees Mayu, who also came to get a lucky set, so they start heading home together, and he explains that they are actually for his siblings. After Mayu admits that she has always loved them, Suzuki realizes that it's raining and gets a little confused about how to return home without getting drenched. Thankfully, his siblings, Suzu and Rei, show up to give him an umbrella. so he asks Mayu to walk with them so she won't get soaked as well. Minutes later, she desperately tries to hide how good it feels to be walking beside him while he continues telling Suzu and Rei to stop playing in the rain. After he apologizes for all the noise, they both ask to see the lucky sets he bought, but he refuses and says they have to wait until they get back home. Naturally, they ignore him and open the lucky set. But while Rei gets excited to see his panda, Suzu loses it and asks why he bought a goldfish. Upon hearing this, Mayu offers to trade since she also got a pan, so Suzu excitedly throws her goldfish in the air. The next moment, it falls right into Mayu's melons and continues flapping against the tip, so she tries to hide her expression, hoping it will eventually fall out. Like that isn't enough, Suzu forcefully hugs her to thank her for the panda, but this causes the pressure on her melons to intensify. Just then, Rei spots a truck coming, so Suzuki pulls them out of the road and crouches with the umbrella to keep Mayu covered from the rain. However, he accidentally shoves the umbrella into her kitty and starts moving it around to resist the wind, while Mayu resists the urge to sing happy songs. After the truck finally passes, Suzuki tries to check on her, but she tells him not to worry and takes off running so he won't notice what happened. Hours later, her sister Saya barges in as she takes a bath and asks why she still buys lucky sets at her age. But Mayu insists that it's a toy for grown-ups and starts planning her next goon session with it. A couple of days after this, Satu shows up at a bar to carry Kana home because she drank way more than her liver could handle. After thanking Mayu for calling, he heads out, leaving Mayu to wonder if she will even find someone who cares about her enough to show up like Satu did. She then drifts into a dream about the day she was meant to write the teacher's exam. In an effort to avoid traffic, she decided to run all the way to school, but after tripping and breaking her shoes, she accepted defeat and thought her dreams of becoming a teacher were over. Just then, she saw Suzuki's face for the first time and almost had a heart attack before realizing that he just wanted to help. After she explained the situation to him, he suddenly carried her on his back and started sprinting across multiple blocks to get her to school. At that moment, Mayu realized that there was a lot more to his ugly face, but his speed had caused her melon wraps to rip open. To make matters worse, his belt pen was also pounding into her cakes as he ran up a flight of stairs, but luckily, he made it to school before she reached the point of no return. She immediately thanked him and apologized for causing such an inconvenience, but he said it was no problem since he loves exercising and quickly ran off before she could ask for his name. After the trip down memory lane, Mayu realizes that Suzuki has been carrying her, so she asks how he knew where she was, and he explains that Satu gave him a call after getting Kana home. Right then, Mayu realizes that it's the perfect opportunity to tell him how she feels, but she panics at the last moment and simply thanks him for the help. Several weeks later, Mayu, Saya, and Suzuki head over to the second academy to plan a festival, and after they introduce themselves to a midget council member named Takashi, he returns the favor and apologizes for the lateness of his advisor. Just then, Hikari barges in and hugs him before taking one look at the girls and asking if they are his type. Takashi immediately tries to stop her from talking, but she continues teasing him and says Mayu would be a perfect fit for his baby carrot. After school, Takashi returns home and decides to handle the festival plans by himself, because Hikari is obviously too immature to take anything seriously. However, the moment he enters his apartment, she welcomes him back and says the heater in her place broke down, which is why she decided to move to his place. He immediately tells her to leave, but she ignores this and drags him into her melons to get some extra warmth. After struggling to get free and failing, he decides to accept his fate because she has been treating him like a living teddy bear since they first started living close to each other. Several minutes later, her grip finally loosens, so he pulls himself up and realizes that the excessive force caused her melon wraps to open up. After getting his demons under control, he tries to fix it, but then she grabs him again. This time, though, he ends up with a mouth full of melons, and after struggling to get free, his intrusive thoughts take over, causing him to continue drinking until she wakes up and catches him in the act. He tries to apologize, but she rubs his head and acts like she is perfectly okay with it before saying that she has to go make food at her place. After she leaves, Takashi feels relieved and thanks his maker that she was actually cool with it. Meanwhile, Hikari starts freaking out by the door and decides to do something about their relationship because he might bend her over if she continues treating him like the little guy she used to play with. The next day, they end up at the store together, and after looking at the kind of toys they once loved to play with, Takashi admits to being a little surprised that she could be so thoughtful. However, Hikari finally tells him that the whole point of coming to the store was so that he could help her do some grown-up shopping. Sensing the evil intent in her eyes, Takashi tries to leave, but she holds him back and dashes to the Victoria's Secret store before telling him to pick a new set for her. When he asks why, she reminds him that her melons have gotten bigger than the ones at home and runs into the dresser so he can choose a pair. Takashi then looks around and realizes that the other chicks are worried about a little creep watching them shop, so he grabs the nearest pair and hands them to Hikari in the dresser. She is surprised by the quick choice, but after taking a look at the pair, shock turns to fear as she becomes convinced that Takashi is a freak with no sort of moral code guiding him. However, instead of heading back out and having a proper conversation with him, she decides to see how far he is willing to go and changes into the hot girl set. The next moment, she gets embarrassed by how it makes her and considers changing back. But then Takashi asks if she is done. As soon as she says yes, he grabs her arm and takes off with his eyes closed to avoid looking at the other girls. Hikari then tries to explain that she is very much exposed, but he refuses to listen, thinking she is just trying to tease him again. At the escalator moments later, he finally stops and tries to tell her about the festival, but after turning back, he sees her melons swinging in the air and freezes in shock. She then asks him to pull up the zipper because she has to hold it down at the back. While struggling to pull it past her giant jugs, she pulls him back in and ends up stuck on the railing. After minutes of happy noises, they stop by at a restaurant to get snacks, so Takashi apologizes for being so careless. Hikari then promises to make him pay, but after pouting for a couple of minutes, she pulls him close for a hug and says she can never be upset with him over something so trivial. She then leaves to get drinks while he stays on the seat and wonders why she is pretending like it was no big deal when her expression a few minutes ago showed that she desperately wanted to get cracked. The next moment, she gets back with a weird drink combo and starts forcing him to drink, so he decides to accept that her freaky episode was just a one-time thing. Days later, their school goes on a hiking trip, but while everyone excitedly follows the trail, Takashi tries to hide from Hikari because he hasn't been able to get her melons out of his head. When she finally finds him and asks why he has been acting strange recently, he slips, so she grabs his arm to save him. Unfortunately, their weight causes the branch to snap, so fall into the raging stream and end up in a cave minutes later. While Takashi tries to stay warm, Hikari watches the rain and continues asking why he has been acting weird. After recalling that he has always had a bad experience with cold temperatures, she asks if he is okay and sees that he is already experiencing the first stages of hypothermia. However, with no other way of making him warm, she decides to do the unthinkable and goes commando before telling him to hug her. Without hesitation, Takashi places his head between her warm chest pillow, but even after feeling a little warm, he becomes dizzy and asks her for water. She immediately tries to grab a bottle, but then he sees a drop trickling down one of her melons and starts drinking it without even realizing. In a bid to stop him, she tries to pour out some tea, but it spills all over her plot cannons, and he immediately starts drinking right from the source. When he reaches the fountain, she tries to stop him, but his thirst overpowers her. Moments later, she cleans him up and rubs his head while he rests on her thighs. In that moment, Takashi realizes that he has been overreacting because she has only ever wanted to take care of him. After reminiscing on all the other times she nursed him back to health, he thanks her and admits to being in love with her before falling asleep. Hikari then frantically tries to wake him up so he can say it again. The following week, the festival finally starts, and as usual, Suzuki ends up in a tight spot because Mayu decided to invite him so they could stay together. When she apologizes for bringing it up at the last moment, he acts like it's not a problem and asks why she is dressed like a student. She then says the other students would have felt weird seeing as teacher walking around and asks if the outfit looks bad. After he compliments her, they run into Hikari, who then teases Mayu and asks why she is so obsessed with his meat stick. Mayu immediately panics since he could have heard, but Hikari quickly changes the topic to a cops and robbers game she set up for the students. After putting her in cuffs, she shoves them both into an empty classroom and tells Suzuki where to find the key before also suggesting that they take this opportunity to do what they have always wanted to do. As soon as she leaves, Suzuki tries to find the key, and when Mayu asks if he heard what Hikari said earlier, he denies it while simultaneously losing his mind because he heard every word and can't stop thinking about the fact that she has feelings for him. After finally grabbing the key, he turns to face her and panics, causing the key to fall into her shirt and snap. He melon wraps open. The next moment, her chest cannons pop out, so he quickly tries to find the key, but she tells him not to bother because it is currently sitting on her cakes. When Takashi suddenly shows up at the door, she says the only option is for him to grab it, and makes him shut his eyes so she can give directions. However, despite hearing her instructions clearly, Suzuki grabs her jugs first, so she redirects his massive hands to her cakes. After he finally grabs the keys and gives her a taste of heaven in the process, he apologizes for always causing trouble, but she recalls how he always helps her out and says she will never get upset at anything he does. Upon hearing this, he reminds her of all their freaky accidents to make sure she knows what he is apologizing for, and she still insists that it's not a problem before confessing her feelings for him. While he freezes in shock, she gets embarrassed and runs out, so he tries to stop her and sees our two favorite couples getting cozy in the hallway. By evening the next day, Takashi and Seiya are shocked to find Hikari trapped in the floorboards of an old school building. Several minutes before this, a teacher had asked both of them to patrol the area since a lot of students were still having fun with the festival activities. While Takashi was excited to take up the job, Seiya was a little worried since it was getting late, but she decided to trust Takashi and commended how mature he had become. Hearing this caused him to get excited, and while they were making small talk, Hikari got jealous because Takashi had only ever been that excited to talk to her. Out of spite, she decided to run into the building to scare him, but just a few seconds later, she fell through the floor and got trapped. After making sure she is actually okay, Takashi and Seiya ask why she is in the building, so she admits that she just wanted to embarrass Takashi so he would drop the manly act. Despite this, Takashi decides to let it slide since no one got hurt, but then Seiya starts pulling his jacket and says they both need to go call someone. As they turn to leave, Hikari gets jealous again and grabs his feet to stop him before realizing that she just caused him to fall through the floorboards as well. Luckily, he survives the fall without any injuries, but after looking up, he gets an eyeful of Kitty and asks why her clothes didn't fall through as well. When he tells her to jump down, she explains that her dress got snagged in the boards and tries to free herself, but then the cold air causes her bladder to reach breaking point. At that moment, Takashi decides to help her up by pushing her legs, but she tells him to stop because she won't be able to hold it in. Unfortunately, he barely hears her through the boards and continues trying until she starts squirming and loudly explains the situation. Thankfully, he finally hears her and quickly grabs a bucket, but then she begs him to move her pot covers to the side so they won't get soaked. Just as she finally unloads into the bucket, Seiya returns with Suzuki, and they both start searching for the source of the waterfall, while Hikari distracts them and prays that her bladder empties before they realize what is happening. Much later, Suzuki fixes the floorboards and discusses what happened with Takashi, while Hikari gets embarrassed and decides to make Takashi piss himself so they can get even. As she tries to grab him, he walks out with Seiya and Suzuki, causing her already fragile heart to shatter into a million pieces. A little while after this, a psycho in a bear costume starts attacking student couples in the halls. By then, Takashi has just met up with Mayu to watch the rest of the festival, but then Seiya shows up to tell them about the bear. Mayu initially gets worried for the students, but then Seiya explains that all the couples who were attacked seem to be having a great time with each other because of it. As a result, all heartbroken loners are now chasing the bear around campus because they believe it is the secret to finding their one true love. Seiya tries to explain further, but after spotting the psycho bear running to safety, she realizes that Mayu has also taken off to join the chase, so she tries to find her. Takashi, on the other hand, gets worried because he has an idea of who is inside the bear costume. Minutes later, Hikari enters the sports room and takes off the helmet to finally get some fresh air. After wondering why everyone suddenly became obsessed with capturing her, she remembers what Takashi did and wonders how he went from depending on her for everything to now becoming a Riz master. Right then, he walks in and asks if she is okay, but she gets shocked and demands to know how he knew she was the psycho bear. After saying that he just had a feeling, he tries to leave with her, but then another wave of miserable virgins starts running through the hall, so she pulls him back inside and shuts the door. She then checks to make sure they are gone before calling out to Takashi and realizing that he fell inside the costume. The next moment, her phone turns on, and after realizing where the fishy smell is coming from, he asks why she entered the costume without plot covers. She then says it was too hot to have regular clothes on and tries to pull him out, but the friction causes her melons to fall on his magic stick. He quickly notices this and tells her to relax because he won't be able to resist milkers while also staring into the kitty he loves the most. This causes Hikari to get embarrassed, so she continues squirming until his magic stick casts a spell on her face. Minutes later, they get help from Suzuki and Seiya. But as Takashi turns to leave, Hikari pulls him back and says he belongs to her forever. At that moment, Mayu, who has been running this entire time, spots a pair of boots and thinks it's the bear. So she hugs it and confesses her love for Suzuki before looking up and seeing the shocked look on his face. She immediately tries to apologize, but he stops her and says he doesn't have the finances to take care of a plot-heavy baddie like her. This causes her to get sad, but then he asks if she would be willing to date until he gets his life together, so they can get married. After she passes out from shock, Seiya asks if he has lost it, but he gets confused and asks if that hasn't always been the plan. Shortly after this, another teacher named Chizuru sees Hikaru and Takashi holding hands and wishes she had someone she could clap in secret to. At a restaurant, days later, a brokey named Tanaka hears about Satu and Suzuki's forbidden love stories and gets surprised since he has never had a girlfriend in his miserable life. However, he decides not to let it get to him and says it's probably because the teachers in their school are easy. Just then, Satu tells him that Takashi has also been getting sloppy tops from Hiraki. And after taking a moment to process, Tanaka promises to get a girlfriend in the next 3 months and runs away to hide his tears. Much later, work in the kitchen gets a lot more intense, so he accepts that finding love would be impossible when his entire life revolves around steroid-pumping chefs. Just as he heads out to pour out the expired grease, Chizuru shows up and gets drenched in oil, so he quickly takes her to the changing room and offers to get a new shirt. When she coldly says she would rather enjoy a cup of coffee in quiet than listen to him rant about being sorry, his heart freezes over as he recalls why everyone in school is terrified of being in the same room with her. He eventually manages to get a new shirt and patiently waits for her to take it. But then she suddenly takes off the shirt he ruined, revealing 2 massive jugs that deep fry the little brain matter he has left. After taking a couple of minutes to get his head straight, he apologizes once again and tries to leave. But he slips on her grease-soaked shirt and accidentally takes off her melon wraps. Once again, her milkers and hot bod cause his brain to lag, so she tells him to get off. But while trying to step back, he realizes that his ankle got sprained and uses her melons as a cushion to keep himself from falling. Instead of attacking him like a sensible adult, Chizuru asks if he needs help with the sprain, but he completely ignores that to focus on the subtle movements he just noticed at the tip of her melon. This finally forces a reaction out of her, so he blocks his view and tells him to stop looking. The next moment, Tanaka's brain implodes, and after she eventually puts on the new shirt, he apologizes again. She then tries to help with his ankle, but he gets flustered and offers to get her new pants as well before running off. At school the next day, Chizuru asks Hikari for help because she has finally gotten tired of being the most feared and avoided teacher. Hikari then says her main problem is her lack of expression. And while Chizuru takes a look in the mirror to fix her resting mean face, Hikari further explains how she has to find someone who easily expresses themselves so she can learn from them. At that moment, Chizuru remembers how Tanaka easily expressed his creepy desires yesterday and decides to use him as her guinea pig. By the weekend, he is shocked to find her dressed like Santa's little helper in his living room with a camera pointed directly at his face. When he asks why, she explains her new mission to improve her social life and says he is the only one she can learn from. But then he says he actually wants to learn about her first. She then hooks the camera up to his screen and shows him clips from when she was younger, and how she always wrote her name on anything that belonged to her. After a couple more clips, he sees a lonely Christmas pic from the year before and gets worried, so she admits that life has been a little lonely since she left her parents. When she suddenly says that this Christmas feels a lot better, his virgin mind immediately thinks she has feelings for him, but he quickly cures his own delusions and offers to help her make another video. Right then, he sees her kitty on the screen and panics, causing the table to lose balance. As the champagne bottle drops, Chizuru dives in to save the cake and ends up sitting on his head. The next moment, one of the bottles pops right under the happy spot and forces an expression she has never used before. Tanaka then spots her name on her plot cover and asks if she also writes on them, but she blocks his face again and says he can't know about that just yet. Minutes later, she changes into his shorts, and he apologizes for everything before thanking her for coming over. After she gives him a present, he also brings out a box for her and says he intended to use it as a first date gift. She then opens up the box and sees a large bear, so she immediately writes her name and thanks him with a smile before leaving. while he gets shocked to see that her gift is the plot cover she just took off. She realizes that she gave him the wrong gift. At a beach resort several weeks later, Tanaka struggles to believe his eyes when Chizuru shows up to spend the entire day with him. Days before this, he had just decided to escort her home as usual. But this time, she felt a strong need to thank him despite telling her not to worry about it so many times. After telling him about a lottery game and promising to share her wins equally with him, she played the game and won free tickets to the beach resort. Back in real time, he still struggles to believe that she would actually spend the entire day alone with her. Just as he starts realizing that she might have feelings, she drags him to a nice spot close to the water and immediately strips so they can start swimming. Unfortunately, Tanaka points out the no swimming sign, but this causes her to get embarrassed, so he runs around booking for other fun stuff they can do together. After finding a hermit crab for her to play with, he starts feeling bad that she won't enjoy the water like she wanted to. But then he sees her suitcase about to be swept off by the current. The next moment, she falls into the water and loses her kitty cover in the process, but he barely notices and jumps in to save her. She then tries to tell him what happened, but he quickly pushes her up and gets an eyeful of buns when he looks up. Despite this, he manages to push her onto the edge, but her new crab friends get curious about the massive milk jugs they just dropped in its face. After it grabs one, Chizuru falls back on his shoulders and asks for help, so he tries to pull the crab off but ends up grabbing the wrong melon. Much later, he asks if she lost anything to the water, and while checking on her stuff, he spots a magazine about date spots and asks if she planned this thing to make him feel good. When she admits to it and says she didn't want him to get bored with her, he gets flustered and says he will never get bored with being with her. Hearing this causes Chizuru to feel better about their failed date, so she decides to head back to the H hotel, but Tanaka starts to wonder why his heart won't stop racing. After a couple more days of going on dates, his heart continues racing every time he sees her face, so he decides to stop thinking about it and just go with the flow. On the last night of the trip, she takes him up a mountain trail and says they need to reach a high point to watch the stars. However, it suddenly starts raining, so they run into a cave to avoid the rain. While sitting there, Tanaka notices that she is upset, so he tells her not to worry about it before suddenly getting cold. As soon as he complains about it, she throws her melons on his chest to warm him up, but the excess weight causes him to slip. After tumbling down a hole, they end up in an unholy position, so Tanaka tries to get out, but she stops him and explains that they just entered a stalactite cave. He gets confused. This is so she further explains how long it takes for stalactites to grow and says they can't risk breaking them. The next moment, she starts slowly moving across his body to protect the stalactites, but accidentally shoves her milkers into his mouth. Minutes later, they safely get back up. Chizuru remains upset that they couldn't see the stars. Just then, the moonlight illuminates the entire cave, so they decide to settle for this. When Tanaka asks why she wanted to see the stars so badly, she explains that a shooting star would have been the perfect opportunity to wish for a certain student to fall in love with her. Upon hearing this, Tanaka starts laughing and decides to accept that he has fallen in love with her. But he forgets to use his inside voice and gets embarrassed when she responds like it's no big deal. However, after seconds of trying to hide her true feelings, she closes his eyes so he won't see her current expression. On Valentine's Day the following year, Tanaka starts losing hope in love because he still hasn't received any chocolate from Chizuru. When Takashi walks into class to show him the chocolate box Hikari made him, Tanaka loses it, but eventually decides to wait until Chizuru shows up. However, after hours of waiting, he decides to accept that she never had feelings for him and packs up to head home, only to see that a snowstorm has just started. Despite this, he decides to take the risk and walk home, but on the way out, he hears a loud thud and sees that Chizuru's body has just frozen up due to the insane temperature drop. He quickly takes her inside to warm up by a fireplace in one of the teachers, and after realizing that her clothes are drenched, she decides to take them off. Tanaka then expects her to casually strip while he watches, like she usually would, but this time, she tells him to face the other way. Afterwards, he spots a box of chocolates and tries to take a look, but she quickly grabs it, so he asks if Hikari made one for her as well. She then tries to explain, but the cold creeps in, so he suggests eating the chocolate to feel a little better. When she offers to share it with him, he tells her not to worry since he still feels okay, so she tries to take a bite, but it suddenly melts all over her milk jugs. Just then, Tanaka tries to get you, but a quick slip launches his face straight into the chocolate. After eating the whole thing, he apologizes, but she tells him not to worry because she actually bought it for him. She further explains how Hikari helped her make it, which is why the boxes look similar. With Tanaka's hope in love restored, he reminds her of the time he confessed his feelings during the trip and says he is ready to take their relationship to the next stage. Unfortunately, she rejects him, so he immediately tries to leave, but after taking a look outside, he sits again and regrets ever opening his mouth, while she decides to wait until he graduates. Months later, he finally graduates and barely manages to hold back the tears while giving a speech because he failed to lose his V-card while in school. At home that evening, he was surprised to see Satu and the others, so Satu explained how they decided to go on a trip to celebrate his graduation. While they continue talking, the girls start cooking, but then Chizuru suddenly spills butter all over her clothes, so Hikari tells Tanaka to get her some clean clothes to change into. In his room moments later, she congratulates him, and when he tries to thank her respectfully, she tells him to stop calling her teacher since he is not a student anymore. Embarrassed, Tanaka becomes convinced that she hates his guts, so she brings out a tracksuit and walks out so she can change. However, she realizes that he misunderstood and decides to tell him how she really feels after changing. After getting rid of her soiled clothes, she sees a framed picture of both of them and makes up her mind, but then she accidentally knocks it down and dives to save it. The next moment, a fishing line falls as well, and by the time Tanaka shows up to check on her, he finds her tangled up and stuck to the door, so he runs off to get a pair of scissors. Just then, she hears Hikari and Takashi coming to the room and tries to pull the line with her kitty instead of using her hands like a normal person. As expected, she runs out of energy and accepts that they are about to see her cake, but Tanaka jumps in at the last moment and shuts the door before getting an eyeful of plot. He then cuts her loose and tries to leave, but she suddenly hugs him and admits that she has wanted to date him for months, but she couldn't since he was still a student back then. After crying tears of joy, he takes her back to the living room so they can all plan the trip. Days later, the lovebirds all go on dates to improve their bond, and after a lot of chatting, Tanaka takes Chizuru to a tree for a makeout session. However, they get shocked to see that everyone else had the same idea. Which teacher is the hottest in your opinion? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing to make sure you never miss any of our videos.